one of the things that I saw, so as an analyst, looking at a 40,000 foot view of the industry, and what really got me concerned, and I started talking to processors about it openly, is everybody's rushing towards this bottleneck of we're going to produce fiber for some biocomposite, some car manufacturer, something, right? I actually had the opportunity to sit down and have dinner with one of these guys who works for one of the largest global producers of automotive matting for making.
Hey guys, it's Mandy with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials.
And we're live. Hello, hello. And I see our other guest joined. I don't know if she can hear us. Remind me her name again.
Lorelei.
Lorelei, if you can hear us, let us know. You can turn your camera on and I'll just add you into the stream. But everybody else that's listening, thank you very much for joining. I'm really excited about this conversation. So I'm going to do very little talking at the beginning and turn it over. I really encourage you guys to get involved in questions. We will be coming back with the same group to do another great discussion later on. So I'll check dates. Joseph, do you have that date off the top of your head? October 4th?
October 4th.
Jen, awesome, perfect. So on October 4th, there will be a link, if it's not already, on the friendsofhemp.org website where you can register. And I'll share the link here as well here in just a minute. But please chime in with any questions. Let us know where you're chiming in from so we kind of get an idea of who's on as well. But Joseph, do you want to start off real quick with a quick intro, who you are, how you got into this, and how long you've been in the industry? And then we'll pass it over to Jen.
Sure. My name is Joseph Carrington. Founded Canna Markets Group in 2019 as an industrial hemp consultancy think tank, where we are there to provide a variety of business planning, product development, support services, executive level consulting, and project management. And my background in the hemp industry goes back to initially in 92, starting out as a cannabis activist and medical cannabis activist in college. And in 1996, 1997, I discovered industrial hemp and switched into that space via textiles, coming from a textiles background, actually working in a variety of different retail fashion, textile fashion outlets, and moving up through that from starting at 15 in the stockroom, working my way up to sales and marketing. And then, but in 97, switched into industrial, never looked back, and was in that space until 04. Took a brief hiatus while the industry was reconfiguring and came back in 2019. So I'll turn it over to Jen to do it.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm Jen Adams. I'm with Joseph and Canna Markets Group. I think my title does change from here to there, but I have not been in the industry as long as Joseph. My background is in community development, and I did disaster mitigation and logistics and supply chains for a while. And I really wanted to get out from underneath the disaster and hopefully get in front of the disasters. And Joseph and I had worked on a board, an environmental board for a while. And so he brought me in, and I've loved it. I know it's frustrating, but I'm very excited with the talent that I have been witnessing and the possibility of actually making this an industry here in the United States. Hi, Lorelei.
Perfect timing, Lorelei. Introduce yourself.
Yes, perfect timing. That was like we're cued right in. Perfect. Yeah, we'd love a quick intro.
Sorry, what was that?
Yep, go ahead and introduce yourself, Lorelei.
I'm Lorelei Alvarez, and I've been working with Joseph for the last 3 years on this project, doing some research, Yeah, I have a PhD in environmental science. I graduated from the University of Virginia, and most of my research has been looking at land use and degradation of ecosystems in forests and in grasslands, desert grasslands. So happy to be here, chat with you guys.
I have people in my backyard doing yard work, and so that's why I keep putting myself on mute, because when I'm off mute, that's the lawnmowers. It only happens when I'm live. That's the time anybody gets on. So, hi, Daryl. It's good to see you also. Well, Joseph, I don't know if you want to kind of start off and where we're headed. Peter, I see that you're logging on also from Paris. Thank you very much for joining. Some of the topics I'm really curious and maybe just get started with is the social, political, and cultural aspects of hemp. Where are those really playing roles, and where do you see that shaping up with the current industry now and where it's headed?
So that topic is associated with a paper that I did this past summer at Syracuse University, and it's eventually going to turn into a broader piece of work that spans 10,000 years. And why I started working on that project was to start to divide out some of the myths from take the myths and the inaccuracies and start finding what the facts are. There's the 1990s era into the early 2000s, which in my paper I've dubbed the Jack Herer era of industrial hemp. The Jack Herer era is just that. It's of cannabis, not industrial hemp. There was a lot of misconceptions that came out of what the emperor did, and I don't believe that there was things that, like, I'm not a Jack basher. Actually, I spoke with Jack. I say it in my paper. He's an awesome human being. He did so much for the industry, but there are some inconsistencies and some things that were definitely stretched. And 1 acre of hemp does not equal 4 acres of trees. It drives me nuts every single time I see that meme. That's something that's left over from that. In the 10,000 years-ish of interaction between human beings and the cannabis plant, the most common thing and the most stable thing we've ever done with it is make fiber. Talking about all of these other uses and things, it's fiber for cordage, fiber for some textiles. Not everybody made textiles, so there's a lot of claims that get made across the board that we need to get out there. And as the industry now, as we've gained decriminalization, we're starting to go and work in these academic forums. It's our responsibility to bring this data out there and start setting the record straight. So that's what the background on that is. Are there particular things that you would like to touch inside of that?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. What are some of the key falses, like the 1 acre of trees, 4 times the amount of production for hemp? What are some other myths, right, that we have been told that are still being told today that are almost like hurdles we're going to have to overcome because we're going to have to reteach? Let's
look at decriminalization. I think that's, for me, that was one of the big ones. You get this discussion of the cabal between Anslinger and Hearst, and it was this big thing because they wanted to go after industrial hemp because it had all this potential to do everything, and it was going to compete with the wood products industry and with oil. It's the biggest nonsense of all of them. And hemp has always had a potential, and in the countries where hemp has done well, hemp stayed legal. By the time that industrial hemp was being corralled into the psychoactive cannabis space in the temperance movement, essentially, due to the studies that were being done with Indian hemp psychosis around 1850 and 1860, which goes back to the League of Nations, and you're dealing with the UK predominantly was where that came from. By the time the temperance movement moved up into that point where you have Anslinger, who was brother-in-law with Mellon. Mellon was funding Hearst's paper company, which was using DuPont to make to grow their trees. So that's the connection between them. But they didn't get together and go, oh, we're going to make hemp illegal because we feel threatened by it. Hemp was already on a decline. Yeah. We never grew. The part of what rolls into that is this myth that we were this amazing hemp growing nation. We grew hemp, we never exported the hemp that we were supposed to export from the colonies back to England in the 1700s. By the time that we were our own country, we were still purchasing hemp at that point from Russia, interestingly enough, because Russia made the best fiber in the world for marine applications, which was the predominant usage of hemp at that point, industrial hemp at that point. And what made their hemp so good was that their water retting process opened the fibers so that the tars and the oils that they use to waterproof the rope, because another big myth that hemp is impervious to salt water. No, hemp will degrade in salt water unless you treat it. So you have to treat it with all these oils and resins to stabilize it. We had actually tried to use our domestic hemp from Kentucky because by the time we had reached being an independent nation, hemp had pushed its way out of Virginia because tobacco, cotton, all those other crops became easier to grow. They were just easier to grow. The original coastal colonies wanted nothing to do with it. It pushed into Kentucky. Kentucky was still making it for pioneer cordage and homespun. And when they tried to use that fiber for marine applications for the U.S. Navy, even after they passed a law putting a tariff on imported Russian hemp fiber to try to bolster the industry, the Navy still rejected it because it wouldn't hold up longer than 18 months. So this claim that, and I'd spoken with somebody who's from Kentucky, and they're like, we have a vibrant history of growing, the best hemp in Kentucky. It's like, we have a vibrant history of maybe growing some hemp. As far as it being the best, definitely not. And the sooner we stop making these claims about we're number one with what we've done, and we go, we've done it, but we need to do it better, and we need to figure it out, then we can start moving forward with that. So a lot of what the paper's been about is figuring out how to, again, dispel myths, add some truth, have some historical accuracy. Hemp for Victory. Lorelei, we talked about this one, like the exact acreage was something like 40-something thousand acres or around that. But Hemp for Victory never came into being what it was supposed to be because the war ended. So there was the ramp up with that. There was, tens of thousands of acres were grown, but it never ended up doing what the claims were in the 90s about how it was this, you can even go back to like the idea that George Bush's parachute had hemp on it. Hemp's a really heavy fiber. There's never been anything found to substantiate that claim. So there's a lot of these things that are really important for us to take responsibility for and go, it's a fantastic plant. It has some wonderful potential. Let's figure out what it can really do. And moving forward from that, let's look at the products that it's done consistently and it's done well. And let's figure out how to grow from that.
Okay, my guys outside just shut up a little bit, or were quiet a little bit, but I love what you said, and I'm curious from both Jen and Lorelei, what are some of your perspectives, or do you have anything you want to add to this, specifically around the topic where you said where hemp has done well, it stayed legal, right? That's and finding where is that niche and where is true opportunity that you guys have found in your research and your experience. Jen?
Lorelei?
Lorelei.
Lorelei, I don't know if can you answer that? You want me to take it?
Go ahead, Jen.
Well, I guess it's where it does well. Going back to the misunderstanding and how it was just put underneath the psychoactive umbrella has created a bottleneck of problems now, even in the licensing pathway for certain farmers, each individual state. So all of the bad information back then that Joseph's speaking of has bottlenecked now, even though, and countries that followed suit, like Japan, for example, when they did the prohibition of it, or the same kind of thing. It's the lack of education about it, really. And in speaking with, pretty much everyone from every aspect of the industry, from farmers to state to federal level, they all say the same thing. It's the absence of education about it, and the this big claim that it was this thing when it was not.
Well, and it's coming on and on and on, right? We continue to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Lorelei, what feedback do you have? Or do you have anything you can add? Want to add? Maybe. Dang mute button.
Yeah, just in terms of, so in many countries, you know, Joseph and I have had these conversations in many countries like China, Russia, Hungary, you know, places where it's like a continuity, right? That production has been consistent and it's been utilized. The technology is there, the processing infrastructure is there, the things that are needed for manufacturing, for production of actual product that's marketable, right? Those things are all in place, and those things are lacking in this country and in countries where it was made illegal for so many years. And so now the U.S. is in a position where I feel like we have to play catch up, and there are other places where hemp is being industrial hemp is being done well, right? And we're not the ones doing that yet, and we have a lot to learn, and I think we have a lot to learn from other places that are doing it well. And we need to kind of, I feel like in this country, sometimes we kind of need to get out of our own way and stop, you know, America's the best, America's wonderful, America's great. But we do have things, because we put ourselves in this position of not being able to move forward with research and processing and facilities and production for so long. Now we can't say, well, we're the best and we're going to just go full speed ahead. We've got to do the research, we've got to do the work, and we've got to figure out how to move forward in the best possible way. And from an environmental scientist perspective, we also need to do that from the position and the perspective of environmental sustainability, because our entire agricultural system is really struggling right now with sustainability. And we have the ability with this particular crop, this particular plant, to try to move forward in a different way. But we have to learn, and we have to be able to grow, instead of just saying, you know, we're the best, we're going to do it the best.
Absolutely. So this kind of goes back to, like, what is the best and what is the model that we need? And we were talking before we got online about, you know, what's the end product we're manufacturing for, and our processors processing just a process, or where are they going, and on the, you know, all the way down the supply chain. So can we kind of move? I feel like this is a great transition to talk about securing that supply chain and what that means. Joseph, you want to start?
Sure, I can jump in. So I had the good fortune to be in Montana with you at the 2022 Hemp Summit out at IND, and one of the things that I saw, so as an analyst, looking at a 40,000 foot view of the industry, and what really got me concerned, and I started talking to processors about it openly, is everybody's rushing towards this bottleneck of, we're going to produce fiber for some biocomposite, some car manufacturer, something, right? I actually had the opportunity to sit down and have dinner with one of these guys who works for one of the largest global producers of automotive matting for making fiber. And we don't produce a fiber here yet. And he hasn't seen anything that's given any indication that there's a fiber that's going to reach that quality in the near term. And not that it's not possible, it's going to happen. We know that it'll eventually get there. But as a person who has that view back to the 90s of seeing when an industry was dealing with constant business collapse because we didn't have processing and domestic control of manufacturing, and you saw companies failing again and again and again, that were companies that had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So these are still reasonable businesses, but your average company's a couple $100,000, definitely not much more than $1 million, if anybody had $1 million invested back then in a short period of time. To now looking at these companies that are investing millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars to set up processing, to get processing in place. They're getting large grants. We're at a point where the industry can't afford to have a failure like we did in the 90s with the product-driven company collapses because of, we didn't have the processing and we were importing. We need to go back and like these processors, one of the most wonderful things about industrial hemp is that you can vertically integrate. And so whether it's, I&D taking the time to like have one product that's vertically integrated with their hemp tanna line, super smart, like great, that's awesome. Processors need to be looking at that so that they're not all rushing in to go, okay, we're going to like drop this fiber off to car manufacturer X and hope that we're on a commodities level where things are being purchased. It's part of the business model, but if that's your business model coming out of the gate, you're missing that's a non-sustainable model if you're not able to compete in the beginning.
I hear two things, and then I'd love to hear Jen, both your girls' opinions. Is we've got to be able to separate the high THC, low THC production from the fiber and grain. That was said a couple of times. And then also the building of equipment really needs to be geared towards or specific to that end product. The supply chain development is geared to end product. And what is that end product? Jen, Lorelei, do you guys have anything you want to add?
Well, I when it comes to the supply chain and anyone that I've talked to, it's, like what Joseph was saying, it's like they have all this razzle dazzle and going back to the States about how like we're the best and all of that. There's no mention of investing in the supply chain itself, all of the parts to it, right? So that's like the bottleneck that we're all rushing to doesn't have the capacity. It's a false sense of capacity. So the unique position I see ourselves in is we don't have to reinvent the wheel with the supply chain. We can retrofit and adapt. And like we've come across some pieces of machinery that need to be created to have a better effect on the footprint and whatnot. So, when it comes to the supply chain, we'd had a conversation about the farmers have to be at the table for the discussion. Like everyone needs to be at the table to ensure that it is cyclical and vertical at the same time, and again, it comes back to investing in the supply chain, and people I think it just gets lost on people.
So when you say invest in the supply chain, tell me what that looks like. What is so a simple thing. I'll just use North Carolina, and if anyone has information that disputes this, please let us know, because this is what I know thus far. But for example, let's say a product is like, okay, we want to grow 5,000 acres in North Carolina to do textile, just as an example. Well, in order to get a hemp growing license, you have to have been growing agriculture for 2 years, or another state may have another way. So the pathway, and in order to just get the farmers to grow, is a huge bottleneck supply chain. So investing, and it's not even that costly. It's mostly, getting these pathways to licensing the farmers, supporting the farmers, getting them on a value added crop, like with carbon credits and all of that, which is a whole nother discussion. But simple, small little things like that can, and is slowing things down, can slow it down, but people don't think about or think about those small little details, That's just a small example. I'm going to give a plug to the hemp exemption, back to kind of what I said just a second ago, and I'll share the link here. Let me see if I can find it. But the hemp exemption is basically putting forth effort, a bill around the separation of fiber and grain that allows the barrier of entry, hopefully, to be less, the requirements for farmers that are growing for fiber or grain to be less than a cannabinoid production. And so I'm hopeful that those types of things, I encourage everybody to get on hempexemption.com and check it out, support what they're doing, because it really is, we've lost the industrial in hemp, hemp. Right?
Well, getting back to like when we were looking at the United States, and this was a couple of years ago, I was actually looking at states that didn't have it legalized, didn't have the psychoactive legalized, so we wouldn't have to worry about testing. Once New York opened up, it was like there's not going to be I don't see New York now being a big industrial hemp state anymore, right? So, hope that would, a girl can dream, like I hope that they do that, and I hope it's not too much red tape. I think we have enough work to do in the next few years, and I think we have. I think we have all the pieces. I really do.
I'd like to jump in on something that Pharmax, a comment that Pharmax made, because that says that there's a bunch of companies planning to utilize wood for SAF, which is sustainable aviation fuel, is what I'm assuming he was referring to. But hemp has twice the cellulose as wood. Growing acres for biorefining would provide security for farmers to commit. I want to partially agree with that comment. But when I'm talking about infrastructure, when we're talking about infrastructure, so one of the things that I started researching just to see what it would take to be able to have a domestic source of twine after the DoD RFI came out, and we had actually worked to send them which was less of showing them what was available, but more giving them a background on what wasn't, and the fact that we have a domestic national security risk for the fact that we have no ability to produce twine at a commercially viable mass scale in this country. And the ironic part about all of this, after doing all the research, China's machines use essentially a yarn that comes as a result of their textile industry. So that's why their twine is so beautiful and supple, and everybody wants to make crafts with their twine, right? And then you go over to Eastern Europe and you see the Hungarian twine, which is the rougher, more fibrous looking twine. That machinery that they're manufacturing with is 75 years old. The equipment manufacturers that made that equipment don't exist anymore. And the equipment we need to model after, and where this research was being done for, was to be able to give the fiber processors an ability to be able to offload their non-perfect fiber to maybe be able to make something like hay bale twine, because of just some changes that may have to happen because of the way that hay bales are being wrapped in plastic and it's killing cows. And so to be able to do that equipment, to work with that rougher twine, it exists in Russia. So nobody even has access to being able to put this together. So though I agree with Pharmax that yes, biorefining would be great, you're going already into an existing supply chain, which is awesome, because I believe in strategic partnerships. But the industry itself, where we have things like fiber that we need to figure out how to process, and the most basic thing we've ever made with hemp as a species is cordage, and we can't do that in our country. That's a serious strategic problem. And the fact that anybody could come in and throw some money at that problem, whether it's researching to build the equipment or whatever. And it's not a small amount of money, but it's a reasonable amount of money that would be able to, in turn, provide Hobby Lobby, Walmart, Michaels, like all of these different companies that are importing that twine product. Now you've got a domestic sales source, and you also have a domestic processor working together. So
awesome. Do you ladies have anything you want to add, Lorelei?
Well, that just goes back to what we were saying before, that need for the research to be done here, the processing to be done here, for us to figure out the supply chains, invest in the supply chains, like Jen is talking about, getting the farmers involved, vertical integration. I mean, these are steps that are really necessary in the industry. And I agree with Joseph, biofuel, that's a great idea. Possibly, there's some environmental concerns that I have about that in terms of sustainability. But the bottom line is, if we're right now we can't even produce twine because we lack the equipment, the manufacturing, everything. That's where we have to start, I think, at the basic level, right?
Okay, so I want to give a shout out real quick when we're talking about the biorefineries and biofuels. The USDA has some great partners has done a lot of research on trying to figure some of this out. I've done a couple of interviews. If you look up hemp biorefinery, they're doing like biobutanol, protein, sugars, things like that, but small scale. right, in smaller areas. But again, there's a lot of red tape to enter and to get the bio aspect into the fuel. I did an interview last week, which was really fascinating too, with somebody who trades, buys and sells carbon dioxide. And the green grass or the green or biogas is really appealing to the industry. And so utilizing hemp as a bio feedstock or a feedstock into ethanol production is really exciting for the CO2 industry. However, bio, right, is also considering like waste, fecal matter, right? Animal waste. And so the definition there becomes red tape that we have to clean up, because if we're creating a biomaterial that's a clean material into a food grade CO2, it can't be classified as bio necessarily, or we've got to change the definition for clean and dirty bio. And so I think this just speaks to the red tape on scalability of industry and what we're capable of doing and where we're going to enter the market initially. And so, yeah, I don't know if Joseph, are you reading some comments? I don't know if you see.
I'm wanting to give a shout out to Peter Halmendahl.
Yeah.
So he was asking what countries do we see as pioneers. I don't know if I see anybody right now. I would showcase as a pioneer more so than I would say that there are countries like France, and there's been a couple shout outs to France, and my apologies in the very beginning, because actually one of a company we just started working with who's a domestic producer of hemp-based fabrics in the United States that imports their fiber comes from France. France has been there since before I got into the industry. They never left, and I'm really, my apologies for us leaving France out in the beginning. But as far as like pioneering, there's continuums. And you can have opinions about China all day long. And yes, I've talked to people that have worked with China. I know people who've worked with China very closely. Until I go myself and I see what exactly is going on, I've heard of good processing being done. I've heard of bad processing being done. So I'm not going to throw the whole country under the bus either. There's technologies out there, whether it's France, China, Romania, the Netherlands, places where there is still hemp production going on that we can model after. And we should be looking to as strategic country partners to work with to be able to regionalize and develop our industry here in the United States, our country.
I'm interested in your comment too, Fred, or your perspective here, because as we talk about viable markets, right? And this is something that I kind of want to dive into with your guys' expertise is, those viable markets long-term versus what we're seeing now or today as far as moving material. Decorticators are big enough now to sample out for R&D projects and are ready to invest in tech acres. And they, if they get PO, they have bedding and construction demand for herd to keep them making the money to keep it to that finished line, which is different than before. Feedback?
There's definitely some truth to that. But at the same time, with regards to the decorticating, how are you decorticating it? What are you doing with the stock before you prep it to run it through the decorticator? Some stock is, cut at 2 feet, set up with a very distinct length. It's not bundled. Like I was talking to a Hungarian hemp manufacturer, and was just ripping on the way that we process our hemp right now in the United States. And he's like, you guys bundle it like, hey, what do you think that's going to do to your fiber? You take and you roll it up, you crush it, and then you put it through a giant debaler, which shreds it. And they take their stalks and they're very careful with them, and they cut them at a specific length, and they feed it through with some intention and some thought to it. And, and you're getting a different fiber. So again, it's the demand, like for R&D projects, there's definitely the ability to decorticate for that, but it's going to come down to the initial care at the farm level. How is it being harvested? How is it being laid in the field? How is it being bundled up? What is that prep? And then how are you storing it? That's our storage processes right now. And this is part of our learning curve, which is why as we start to figure that stuff out, as an industry, and people start to also define themselves out into those areas. I also think that we're going to need more than just hemp animal bedding. to be able to sustain the industry, because that's everybody throws that out there, and it's awesome. It's a viable product source, and I think it's a great product. But we also need to change consumer buying habits on a cultural scale. So we need culturally recognizable products that people can identify with and go, oh, that's hemp. I want to use that. Okay.
Something that was really interesting, I went after the Montana event. I was at another event where I talked to Jay from Oregon State University, who has been in China a number of times. And what he has seen with the herd is they bury it. They use the fiber and then bury the herd. And so that was very telling to me where their market focus was and where they really saw economic value in their crop. Does that mean all farmers there do that? No, right? But in perspective of the value of herd to the fiber production, it was really, it's just something to think about, I guess, on production. And I also worry, long term, how long is it before the animal bedding market is flooded? Or once we get some of these large developers, large fiber processors coming on where herd is the byproduct or their waste material at a lower cost. And so those are kind of things that are at the forefront of discussion, or that I think really need to be at the forefront of discussion when we're talking about the business plan and end product. Can you kind of talk about development of end product and what that means for consumers and need for consumer to be able to purchase a product in order to scale this market?
So without getting, I got to tread lightly on this one because we're in the middle of a project. In the 1990s, the Oregon State created an MDF particle board. All right, and it's all 100% herd based. And when I look at the construction sector, having had the opportunity to work as a general contractor, project manage inside of construction at one point. You go on a job site, right? If you're working with something like hempcrete, and this isn't a hempcrete bashing comment. It's right now it seems like the Hemp Building Association is so focused on two particular products. You've got hempcrete and you've got hemp insulation. You go into a construction site and you see particle board MDF all over the place. They don't care what it's made out of. So this is what I'm talking about, not cultural buying habits, right? If I have a person who is going to use hempcrete on a job site, I've got to train them on how to do that assembly process, because it's not a product. It's a group of ingredients that have to be prepared, and then you have to have a skilled laborer apply that. Even if you're working with hemp block, that is a mason, somebody who's been trained, somebody who has to work with that, and you're teaching that inside of a construction process. You take a wood-based product like an MDF that goes up on the outside of a house, it can go on the roof, it can go on the floor, and you put that together. Anybody on a job site will use that. Nobody cares what it's made out of. And at the end of the day, as long as it's price competitive, they'll use it. This is how the hemp industry needs to start thinking now. These are the things that we need to do, is start looking at these things. And when I'm telling processors to consider where they're investing in terms of what they're doing for a product, this is what I'm talking about. If you're not having these conversations and you're just making fiber or herd for the sake of making fiber and herd, and you've got one product that's not able to get into somebody else's industrial supply chain, somebody else's manufacturing supply chain at a consumer level, then you are running the risk of exposing yourself to failure.
Okay, so I think this just sums up this need to understand what we're processing and manufacturing for. So you made a comment earlier that, or one of you did, that the buyer is not buying U.S. fiber because none of the fiber that they've seen in the U.S. produced fits into their spec or their need in order to manufacture auto parts, right? What is it we need to see versus what are we seeing? What are you guys seeing as far as available fiber on the market? And what is that adjustment that's needed in order to hit a big volume auto dealer or some of these others?
So I'll just quickly, the conversation that I had, it was really about just the consistency. That's all it boiled down to. We need it, and I don't have, so the numbers I'm giving right now, they're made up numbers. Like, let's say it was like X number of microns in diameter by 1 3/4 inches. And they need it with a variability of less than like 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch on the length. And they needed a variability of, because if it's on the diameter by X number of microns, because if it's not that, it has the potential to gum up their machine and stop their machine. So with everything is time and motion for them, every time they're stopping to work with a product that doesn't, that they could use something else, why would they take the risk? So, and again, this is great opportunity for us as an industry, because we are fledgling. We're at a birth point of an industry. So now as we can start to identify some of these issues, if you want to get into this area, then know that it's going to take you a minute to learn how to grow the right crop, learn how to harvest it in a way that creates standardization, and you're going to learn how to make your equipment. So whenever I talk to somebody who's got a processing machine coming online, and they're like, oh, we're coming online in 2023, so September next year, I'm like, great. So your year one of that plan is basically just R&D, breaking stuff and learning how to use your equipment. It's like, well, no, we have people training us. And it's like, yeah, I get that. But like, there's always going to be a process, no matter how good you think you're trained on it. You're going to have to figure that stuff out. And so part of our job is to help people realistically start to see blind spots also.
Well, I think that's so important, right? And that's why I like these discussions. And so any questions you guys have, I encourage you guys to drop them in here and talk. And in fact, there was another great comment I wanted to bring up that Bruce addressed around ribbon cutting also. But before we do, Lorelei and Jen, do you guys have anything you want to add?
Well, I was just going to jump in on, it in a perfect world, we would, and that's what we've been building these past couple of years is, really talking to the experts, the ones that know, what strain grows best in which climate and what's the quality, meets what companies are looking to create a product, meets, just a state by state, like the red tape is abundant, right? So that it goes back into the trickling into the crevices of that supply chain that people like I am excited because we actually have the opportunity, not just with the industrial hemp industry, but to have that actually lead the U.S. into a healthier supply chain, like 100%. So that's my big feedback on that. Lorelei?
Hang on, sorry. Yes, I agree completely with Jen, and it's got to be more than just the processing facility, right? It's got to be on the field with the farmer. Like, what is the right cultivar to grow? What is the right retting method? What is the way that where is your fiber going to go? Where's your herd going to go? That integration. I just can't stress enough, I think, the importance of that integration. How are we going to get enough acres to grow what we want to grow? And then how are we going to get that to the processing facilities? Are we shipping? There's so much there, Joseph. Yeah.
No, go ahead, please. I'm reading comments.
Well, no, I mean, and yeah, Lorelei, I mean, we've had this discussion where there's all of these stopgaps, and on top of that, like what Joseph was talking about, like whether it's a new piece of machinery, a retrofitted piece of machinery, whether it's how to, from the agronomy side, there's such a dire need for the again, pathways, education, job, true workforce development. That's specific and also general. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but that way, because it is vertical, it's like this, the vertically circular, right? Where it's like, it needs to be both in order to, I think we had looked at, I mean, I know that there's been numbers that have popped up about like, well, the processing needs to be within 250 miles or 150 miles or whatever it is, to be, carbon neutral or whatever. So we've really looked at where are the farms, where would it make sense to do a primary, a primary or pre-processing where it's, perhaps compiling down the volume as mass so it can be shipped more economically or put on a train, or where are these junction points? What are not being utilized? We were looking at paper mills for a long time in the beginning to see, what would it take, to retrofit and do some runs, but we got to get it in the ground also.
I just wanted to jump in on the comments here. Bruce, your long bass fiber, if you can email me, I'll definitely go through this. I've got to do a little digging for you with this. And then
I would love to learn more about this. And I actually have another interview coming up about this that
cool.
Participate too.
Yeah. And then Peter, you had commented that the EU is no longer buying fiber from China, and I don't know where you will learn that from in the who, but what I wanted to comment with that was, for those people that are looking to sell fiber, a fascinating aspect about China, and we have a client that we've been working with, and they've been working in China for 30 years, and one of the interesting things about China is China cannot grow any more hemp in their country because they are maxed out because of their food need capacity. And they actually will buy as much fiber as we can sell them if we can make it. So for those of you that are actually looking to sell fiber, if we can coalesce an actual commodities exchange for an international market, there is a market there, but we also have to create a fiber quality that is usable for them and work within standards that they're looking for. Please talk about fiber quality standards, testing, and branding. That it's something that we need, and being able to figure out how to create some consensus across the industry. And I think we saw a lot of companies coming together to want to do that when we were at the summit this past August, and I was very excited by that there is a conversation amongst processors about what we need to do to be able to create some standards and a grading system. I mean, we definitely need to have a grading system within the industry that establishes what the qualities of fibers are and what the usages are for that fiber here in the United States, and take some industry responsibility for that.
And I think that's so important for us as an industry to be able to secure big contracts, to know that, take an inventory of who's processing and what are the specs or the products being developed from their facility, so that we know then, if we get a big buyer that's looking for 1 million pounds of something, we know these 3 processors create that spec and can potentially move things forward. And I think that's, either individually or especially while we're growing, being able to diversify our supply chain also gives security to our buyers. There's just lots of need there, tons. Any other comments you want to address real quick? Joseph, did you see any? I see here that, let's see.
What are you jumping at?
Let's see. We're entering the sales markets for fiber, herd, and grain. In addition to CD store brands that we represent. Awesome. I wish my Facebook users would show up. I'm sorry that they don't. Let's see here. Talk to me a little bit when we talk about cultural, right? And if somebody is considering product development, right? We've talked a lot about this need for more than just processing raw materials or understanding where that raw material is going. Talk to me about, getting the product to the shelf so the consumers use it. And what does it mean to be culturally conscious? And what should we be looking at as far as those products that could potentially break into those markets outside of the wall panel, like you said?
So for consumer goods, you have textiles, which is challenging. I know that we don't have textile processing, textile grade fiber yet. And I believe it's coming. I was really encouraged this year. I believe that it's coming. But for even things to be able to do cosmetics, one of the product lines that we worked on in the late 90s was a cosmetic line that was supposed to compete, that was going into Sephora to compete with Body Shop. Those are, you don't have to be that level, but having something that is, do we only need 1 Bronner's? Is there somebody else that can put together a product line using an oil at a higher level? So maybe using more hemp oil than Bronner's uses and making it more hemp oriented and putting that product out there and getting into a Fresh Thyme, a Whole Foods, but starting to look at where can we start putting these in. And as far as like food products go, having food products that if they are good, maybe we can bring the pricing down on that also, because it's when you're competing with Impossible Burger and Beyond Beef, you know, you're going to need to be at their price point. They dictate what the market is. So that's part of it. Also, you have the viability of it being something that is easily acceptable into an already existing cultural paradigm of how a person's going to use a product. But then you've also got to battle their price point as well. Like, what are they willing to pay for that to do something that's all of these wonderful positive things that we say that we're gonna be doing. And textiles. I mean, I'm a textile guy. Like I wish somebody out there would put together a pair of jeans again that I could wear and enjoy, because I've missed mine. Like there was a time from 1997 to like 2001 and a half, I wore nothing but hemp. It's impossible to do anymore, you know, and I miss like Eastern European fabric is some of the most beautiful fabric you'll ever feel. Romanian fabric. That's what I wore when I got married. So.
Love it. Love it. I'm the same way. And I say this all the time. I just want to find it. I want to be able to wear it if I'm repping it and talking about it, but it is very difficult to wear it, to be everything hemp.
Just wanted to too. I think Joseph's making such a good point on affordability, right? What in terms of marketing and culturally, you know, we have this ability to market and maybe say that it's more sustainable. That's again, that kind of goes back to some of those myths that we were talking about earlier. Yes and no, but at the end of the day, something like Beyond Beef, right, versus hemp burger, there's not a lot of difference in sustainability. So it has to be marketable. It has to be affordable, and you're not going to appeal to people to purchase something like hemp burgers at 3 times the cost, right? When they have alternatives that are also sustainable, that are also more environmentally friendly than the beef industry. So yeah, I just think that that's like a really great point that we need to be aware of, is that it can't just be about, it's just great and wonderful.
100%.
Or, but we have to, we're going to appeal to people, it has to be affordable.
Yeah, I mean, they both Lorelei and Joseph know I am not a fan of the lip service and the razzle dazzle of the yes. I mean, at the end of the day, we are actually, if we do it the right way, we are doing the things that these products are claiming. I think it also has to deal with the product too. Like Joseph, you know, we were talking the other day, and it's like I can't remember what it was. It was like a baby blanket or something where it's like the price point. There are certain products where people will pay the extra $20 because of the benefits of the actual product in itself. There might be some products to where people will buy it, like a Bronner's or something that has a proven sustainability. And then you have like things like building materials where, you know, some may withstand, you know, higher temperatures or offer another thing where people, again, may pay the extra money for that. So I think it also depends on the product too, you know.
I'd like to just jump in real quick with Daniel Delano's comment. Should we create regional hubs like M Hub? I'm not familiar with M Hub, but what I am familiar with is this idea of regional hubs. And I am absolutely 100% for regional processing and manufacturing. And in some of the groups that I speak with in terms of the people that I'm working with, we've identified the fact that when you're working within these areas, and you can actually, if you can come up with a strategic partnership and corporate interests that will invest in putting these regional processings together, that's actually going to be more beneficial, because you're when you look at it just from the carbon aspect of it, there's so many benefits, but just the shipping. So like if you're doing if you're making a construction product, just like widget X, and it's going to be delivered and it weighs X number of pounds, if you're delivering that product within a 500-mile ring, you're going to be far more beneficial, not only in your cost, your efficiency of your economies of scale, your cost of goods sold, all of that, if you're delivering within that region, on top of the fact that you're reducing your carbon inputs to the environment by reducing your shipping. So there's so many benefits to that. I'm 100% for that model and would love to see more of that coming on. And I think strategic partnerships between processors and looking at each other and going, hey, I'm 750 miles away from you. Why don't we meet in the middle and come up with a product development project where we partner and we put a product development manufacturing line right in the middle of us, and we do something and we start delivering our herd into that area, or we start delivering our fiber into that area, and we're processing it. I mean, the fact that there isn't anybody other than in North Carolina, I mean, I'm sure there is, and you can, but I don't know how many more there are that can process twine or fiber into yarn. It's amazing to me. I mean, why we haven't found a couple people that have gone, all right, let's go ahead and invest on that together and put that together. So strategic partnerships, regional manufacturing, 100%.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mandy. I was just going to say, I was given permission just on that point. I was given permission to talk a little bit about, you know, the regional stuff is kind of exactly, we partnered in submitting a climate smart grant for the USDA. I think some of you we're all familiar with that one, I guess. But that's exactly what this plan outlines, is identifying key locations in the United States, which makes sense for whatever thing. One region may make sense either historically or culturally or whatever to do textiles. Another region may be better suited for processing and outputting a different product. So there are people that are coming together, and that's one of the things, Mandy, that I was trying to convey earlier, is what I love about this industry is the people that are involved on that level, that are really looking at not just throwing pasta on the wall, but really thinking about the cultural, the environmental, the economic, the educational aspects of building, you know, regional sites like that.
Okay, so I'm really excited to keep hearing this come up, right? That this really is the focus. And what we heard so much in Montana is this focus of need to bring processors together or organizations together to build supply chain. We can't do it on our own. The demand is so big, we cannot, right? But we've got to be able to bridge that gap and meet that demand collectively. And so it's kind of exciting. I'm curious from you guys, your feedback on what's needed as far as structure in order for this to happen. You know, we still have egos involved. We still have people wanting to posture, people wanting to hold on to things, you know, this fear of, you know, well, if I share too much, someone's going to take it. And I kind of laugh at that because
there's no competition.
There's no original idea anymore.
There's so much.
What does structure look like to move this forward?
There's so much room. So like, I mean, and this is, so I grew up with family working in wood products forecasting. And that's where when I see like people talking about the acreages that we have and the volumes and stuff, we just do not even compete on any level with any other agricultural industry. And as soon as we can get that through our mind right now, that as big as you think you are, you're tiny, which means that you want to be able to have strategic partnerships with other people. So if you can take and you can bundle to create another corp or an umbrella corp that's bringing things together, the sooner we start doing that, because that's what the big industries have done. You know, we started Canna Markets Group because we looked at the fact that there was no forest product advisors, there was no random links, there was no fast markets, there was no RECE for the hemp industry, where you could have an organization whose job it was to collect data analytics, be able to think tank and provide view to your blind spots to help things coalesce and develop. We have to start acting like the other industries if we're going to be able to compete within within that sphere. And the exciting thing about that is we can do it in a positive way, because we now know that we need to be climate smart, we need to be circular, we need to be sustainable. So we can become the model moving forward of those things, but you're not going to do it by yourself. You're going to need to work with people. You're going to need to hire a project manager. You're going to need to work with somebody who can do research for you. You're going to need that we have to start acting within those paradigms. And that's what's going to bring that's structurally, that's the stuff that needs to happen. And then also companies who feel comfortable talking and working with each other, you get that vibe, that's when okay, that's the person I'm going to work with, and I'm going to explore that with them. So trust your gut.
Business is still so much about relationship, right? And I think it really is part of what was disconnected during COVID and what we're starting to see come back. It felt so good to shake hands and really advance relationships face to face, because it's a different perspective. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like that's, again, this is, yes, I mean, you have your good and your bad within every industry, but it's been my experience that for the majority all wants the same thing. Like the ones that are trying to compete, they're competing with what, so it's really just, the ones that are stepping up and that are doing the research and knowing that this isn't going to happen overnight. We're in the very beginning of this, right? So it's going to take a while. I wanted to actually also, it was Hawaiian Ninja, I think, had a question about it falling under being a green product. Should the U.S. government subsidize the hemp farmers like they do other crops? Well, there's lots of should when it comes to what the government should do. But the good news is, in the grants that I've seen and the support that I've seen on a federal level, on a state level, mostly on the federal level, hemp is now, like, it even can, you can get crop insurance on it now. So, I mean, hemp is being recognized and supported and I guess subsidized in a way, like, a hemp farmer or a hemp program can get federal grant money. So the answer is yes, they're working towards that.
And ideally, what I would love to see personally is that we get rid of the subsidies for the other agricultural industries.
Yes, 100%.
We actually, we level the playing field across the board, and we redefine how we do agriculture in this country. Yes. I mean, that's so, I would prefer to change that and not have subsidies for the hemp industry. We have strategic granting processes. We have infrastructure building programs, but we also, in some respects, defund corn, defund soy, and we look at it in those regards.
Yeah. Well, and oh, sorry, go ahead, Mandy.
I was going to say, to this point, right? We saw that multiple farmers this year were growing for insurance, or they furloughed their land for the first time in generations, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because the subsidies there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so it's impossible for us. I shouldn't say impossible. It makes it very difficult for us to scale our acres when we're competing with unrealistic, unsustainable cropping systems.
100%.
So yeah,
so to be honest, like, and Joseph knows this, and Lorelei knows this, like the idea of helping, like, I'll take their money and I'll do the thing. But the goal would be to get farmers out underneath those subsidies, because that like, again, it goes back to that false sense of capacity. Lorelei's like, yes.
Yeah, Lorelei.
Did you want to jump in, Lorelei?
Because that a little bit. So that goes back to the sustainability thing, right? Like these subsidies, the whole agricultural system is struggling, right? And it's led to so many issues and the subsidies are just a small part of it, but we can't keep farming the way that we're farming right now, right? Mm-mm. It has to change, because our soils are being depleted because of the amount of chemicals and pesticides and all of that in our systems and then in our bodies. And we have to move forward differently, right? And so just like kind of going into the system the way it is and trying to fit into it's not a sustainable way to move forward. We have, like I said at the beginning, we have the ability with this crop to do it differently because we know what's broken, we know what's wrong in the agricultural system. We can start to educate the farmers. We can start to get rid of the subsidies that are part of the unsustainable agricultural industry, and move forward differently. And we can't do that if we just continue perpetuating the same things over and over and over with this crop. Yeah, I can't agree.
And that's where it gets exciting, right? Is we have, I said for a long time, I don't feel like I'm in this as an exclusive industry. We have a tool to make existing industries healthier, better, localized supply chain, ethically sourced, US grown, less chemicals. But I want to go back to when we look at scaling and utilizing existing industries, like we have struggled this year with certain areas growing because of pesticides due to residual industries or cotton industry. And so it killed some of our trials. Like we just couldn't get trials to come up in certain areas. And I think this is a real testimony to what we're up against as an industry and the severity of where we're at, or the need to be able to bring it to market, right? Is it hit me square in the face when some of our areas couldn't grow, and then we've got processors moving in those areas and we've got failing industries already, in those areas. And so I go back, I feel like we've got real opportunity with hemp to do it different. And the existing industries are looking for a solution to do it different because they're going to feel the pressure and the penalties, and consumers are voting with their dollar. And so, I'm excited.
We have to do it differently. I mean, getting back to the pesticide, I mean, on another value added thing, because when we first started, there was no analytics to be had because there was nothing growing. So we were looking at the waste and what we could do with the waste, then the biochar kind of came into the thing and into the fold. And, some of the testing, some of the numbers we're getting back is like fertilizer. I mean, yes, the goal is to get off of it, but as an agriculture industry as a whole, it's gone up 600-700% because of where we source our nitrogen, right? So because hemp has the ability, and Lorelei can speak to this obviously better than I can, but as far as the reduction of the need for certain pesticides and the hardiness of it alone should be interesting for some farmers that are being buried under some of these costs and not being able to grow.
But that goes back to depending on where you're growing and should you even be growing there. Like Correct. One of the things that I found that I scratch my head at is like I have no love for flood irrigation. I will be completely open with that. I think flood irrigation is one of the biggest wastes of water that we could have, especially in areas that are prone to drought and you're pumping up aquifers. And you hear somebody talking about how they're doing flood irrigation for hemp. If you have to do flood irrigation for hemp, are you growing in the right area? And is that sustainable? And these are the questions, and this is just the environmentalist. And
everything I've seen from people using flood irrigation, it has failed them because just the hemp itself, it's not viable, let alone. And without going into any detail of the conversation, that there is actually, I had a conversation with somebody that successfully flood irrigated. Okay. I was shocked. But then even more so than being shocked that they were successful, it's just to me shocking that how is that sustainable? Like part of what, if you're again going back to this, like we have areas in this country, like if you want to get into the industry, and I agree with something that Peter said, yes, the US has so far to go on so many levels. We have so far to go. But yeah, if you want to get in, another country is going to come in and do it for us. Right. Like, here's the thing. We have this opportunity, but we are up against the time clock because we are not the only ones seeking solutions, and we are behind. I mean, just on the carbon aspect alone on a global scale, right? And so I didn't mean to interrupt you, Joseph. No, you're fine. And then I just want to throw out to Daniel Delano. Lorelei has great information on soil remediation.
So if you'd like to contact us and have a conversation, we've actually had multiple conversations with individual companies, as well as at one point there was somebody from some department, I can't remember, the EPA. I was trying to remember the department from the EPA that got us some information of research that they had done. And there is stuff there that to look at if that's something that you're wanting to find out more information about.
Well, and this is another thing too, when we look at products, right? I'm curious about that type, or a dirty material, right? A toxic material that's been used to clean up, say, a Superfund site. Can it then be put into, say, a railroad tie? Or what
We've been asking, so that's a great question. And you're welcome to a this is a Friday morning coffee conversation that we'll have with each other and be like,
we're going to need to start this because we're already in an hour.
Yeah, because that's something that we've been trying to find out is like, so there are, when I came into Montana, there was one of the guys who spoke at FAR the first day, this guy, David, he and I rode together. There is a certain amount of digestion that the hemp plant does to heavy metals and things that are coming up out of the soil. But we have to quantify that. I don't know what the quantification is of the full amount of digestion and what is left over inside the plant. But from what he was saying, it was some pretty exciting stuff. I have his contact information, can dig it out, and we can share that. And yes, we definitely took up a bunch of your time today.
He just did an interview on National Industrial, or the National Hemp Growers Co-op. It's Dr. Suchoff. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Dr. Dave.
Dr. Dave, yeah.
Or it's Dr. Dave from National Hemp Association. Anyways, National Hemp Co-op. Anyway, sorry, squirrel.
Yes.
But I would love to dive into that more. Yeah, it's awesome. Well, I would love to continue this. I want to encourage everybody that's on. We still have quite a few of you that are listening. Thank you so much for hanging in there. I did share Joseph's contact information and the website. Jen and Lorelei, do you guys have contact info you want to share if people reach out?
Yeah. How do
you
I?
can either add it to the private chat and I can share it, or if you want to say it, I can share it here as well.
Here, I'm going to send it private. Oh, can you do it, Joseph?
I'm going to give her our team page link, which has everybody's email on it.
Oh, that's
in
perfect.
the private chat for you. And yeah, if you have any questions, want to reach out to us. And that's the other thing. We're here for the industry. If you have questions, you want to think tank something, you want to problem solve, you want to brainstorm, please. That's what Canna Markets Group is here for. And we're here to support companies and see your blind spots and make sure that like you're successful, because I've been seeing this for a long time and I want to see more success in the industry. So.
Same, right? And this is where I would love to invite you back. So on October 4th, you can go to the friendsofhemp.org website. Right now, just look for the October 4th. Their pictures are not on. I actually just messaged our girl to be like, you need to update the website. I'm telling everybody about the event and their names aren't on there yet. But if you go on, they are there. So it's October 4th, log in through Zoom, give you an opportunity to actually get to know them. There's a couple of other people from their team that are going to be joining, also rock stars in the industry that we've had on as guests before. But I would love to do this again. You know, maybe it is a half an hour update or a little chat we do as a team with one or all of you again. But I kind of, you know, like you said, people say this all the time to me, is like, oh, you're like an expert in the industry. I'm not. I sit around a table with people like you guys that have been in it for significantly longer. And even then, we're not experts, right?
No.
You're not an expert. And so I want to give value back to the experience that you guys have plays major roles in our advancements, because you've seen things fail in the 90s and, you know, what is needed. And so I encourage people to really lean in. Talk to me real quick before we hang up. What does a typical engagement with you guys look like? So if somebody is looking to engage in services, what does that typically look like, or how does that start?
It really depends. We're a consultancy, so like we have straight up consulting projects that we do for some people. But then, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, there was somebody that messaged us on our forum and said, we're opening a store and we want to have private label toilet paper. Is it possible to do? And somebody jumped on it, did some research for him and sent it back to him, because at the end of the day, we're going to answer the questions and we'll do the research, because we research. That's what we do. And so if it's something from like something more involved, like if you're putting in a primary processing facility and you need a project manager, we have a Six Sigma black belt. We have a Project Management Institute trained project manager that's available to put together and develop full project plans, soup to nuts, like, you know, your work breakdown structure, your risk breakdown, your risk plan, analysis plan, all of that stuff we have, as well as being able to answer there is no question that's too small that we'll turn away. And there are projects that are obviously consulting-based projects that would require a contract to be able to engage.
Awesome. Okay, Daryl said, can we go long today, please, Mandy? Daryl, I'm all about it. Like 100% today. I feel like these guys, however, probably have a life outside of Zoom. But at 1 o'clock today, the Global Fiber Group is going to come on, their entire team, all their partners, to have a similar discussion. I encourage you guys also to come back and listen if you guys would like. I'll share the link here. Also on October 4th is when these guys are logged in. Daryl also said, can we please set up a direct engagement with them, please? Yes, we will do that also.
Awesome.
And so Daryl, thank you so much for chiming in. Daryl's got great questions.
Thank you, Daryl.
Also, heavily involved. I also, during our direct panel, when we're doing Q&A, I encourage hard questions. Like, this is how we're going to.
I love hard questions.
Like, throw up some hesitation, that there's some reservations. I hear all the time on these, and it's been my favorite. In fact, shout out to John Porterfield from Montana, because we were on a panel years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, probably. And somebody got on and said, you can't do that. That's not happening. And somebody else humbly was like, well, it is happening, and here's what we're doing, and here's how we're doing it. And being able to talk through, it not happening to it is, and then how we get it to market are really those challenges. And it really changed perspective right on the panel, or right on the screen, where you saw like, oh, there's a solution now that we thought was completely irrelevant. And so coming into this with an open mind really breeds conversation. And I thank you three very much for joining and for walking the path.
Thanks for having us today. And anytime you want to you want to do those shorter chats and the Q&As, we're happy to come back and do it.
Yeah. And I feel bad that we didn't get to all these questions, but for those that we didn't get to,
come back with those questions, because I want to jump on those.
I mean, there's some great questions, and again,
please.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So here's the October 4th event. I did see one. I don't even know if you want to touch on.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.